For as long as anyone could remember, the old house on Willow Lane had been a source of neighborhood legend. Its peeling paint, tangled hedges, and wild, overgrown backyard made it the perfect setting for dares and whispered stories. The kids called it the jungle, and the woman who lived there, Mrs. Ellison, was the witch, at least in their minds. She rarely came outside, and when she did, she moved slowly, hunched and quiet, her white hair pulled back in a tight bun. Most afternoons, groups of kids would cut through her yard on their way to the creek or the park, ducking behind bushes and giggling as they sprinted past the back porch. Sometimes, Mrs. Ellison would appear at the window, and the bravest among them would wave or shout, just to see if she'd respond. She never did. It was as if she lived in a world apart, her own secret kingdom behind the ivy and the rusted gate. Then, one autumn night, a storm swept through the town. The wind howled, rain battered the rooftops, and lightning split a massive oak in Mrs. Ellison's backyard. By morning, branches and debris were scattered everywhere, and the old fence that separated her yard from the street had collapsed. That Saturday, the kids gathered at the edge of the property, drawn by curiosity and the promise of adventure. They tiptoed through the mud, weaving around fallen limbs, until they reached the far corner of the yard, where the storm had done more than just make a mess. There, beneath the shattered branches, was something none of them had ever seen: a small, carefully tended garden. Hidden for years by the dense undergrowth, rows of white stones marked the edges, each one inscribed with a name and a date. In the center stood a weathered wooden bench, and behind it, a low marble plaque. The kids stared, silent for once, as they read the words, "In memory of the brave souls who wrote back. Friends in war, remembered in peace." Among the stones were tiny American flags, faded letters sealed in plastic, and pressed flowers. One of the boys, Max, picked up a letter and squinted at the handwriting. "Dear Ellie," it began, "your words mean more than you'll ever know." They realized slowly that this wasn't just a garden. It was a memorial, a place of love, loss, and remembrance. Just then, Mrs. Ellison appeared at the back door. She didn't yell or shoo them away. Instead, she watched, her eyes sad but gentle. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice carrying, "Across the yard, you can come closer, if you like. I suppose it's time someone knew their stories." The kids hesitated, then approached, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Mrs. Ellison sat on the bench, motioning for them to join her. She told them about the letters she'd written as a young woman, how she'd become a wartime pen pal for soldiers overseas. She spoke of friendships forged across oceans, of hope sent in envelopes, of the heartbreak when some letters stopped coming. "These stones," she said, her hand trembling as she touched one, "are for the boys who never came home. But they're also for the ones who did, the ones who wrote back, who told me about their lives, their dreams, their fears. We kept each other going." The kids listened, spellbound, as Mrs. Ellison read aloud from a few of the letters. Some were funny, others bittersweet, all filled with gratitude for the kindness of a stranger who became a friend. By the time the sun set, the kids saw Mrs. Ellison and her wild backyard in a new light. What they once thought was just a shortcut was, in truth, a sacred space. And the witch on Willow Lane was really a keeper of memories, a silent guardian of stories that deserved to be heard. From that day on, the kids no longer trespassed. Instead, they visited, helping Mrs. Ellison tend the garden, reading letters, and learning about the power of words to heal and connect Evan across generations. In the days after the storm, the kids on Willow Lane found themselves drawn back to Mrs. Ellison's yard, not out of mischief, but out of respect and curiosity. Each afternoon, they'd gather near the garden, sometimes bringing wildflowers or helping to clear away the last of the storm debris. Mrs. Ellison, once a figure of mystery and rumor, became a gentle guide, inviting them to sit on the old bench and listen. She shared stories from the letters, tales of young soldiers far from home, of birthdays spent in muddy trenches, and of holidays marked by the hope of a letter from Ellie. She showed them faded photographs, a grinning boy from Kansas, a shy artist from Georgia, a pair of brothers who sent her matching drawings of the Eiffel Tower. Some letters were short and cheerful, others long and confessional, but all of them spoke of gratitude for the words that made distant battlefields feel a little less lonely. By one afternoon, as golden leaves drifted through the air, Mrs. Ellison handed Max, the bravest of the kids, a worn envelope. "This one," she said softly, "came from a soldier named Ben. He wrote me every week for a year. When he came home, he visited and planted that rosebush over there." Max read aloud, stumbling a little over the cursive. "Dear Ellie, today was rough. We lost a friend, but your letter made me remember there's still good in the world. Thank you for reminding me what I'm fighting for." The kids grew quiet. For the first time, they understood that the garden was more than a collection of stones and flowers. It was a living memory, a place where kindness had crossed oceans and changed lives. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Parents, once annoyed by their children's trespassing, found themselves drawn to the garden as well. Some brought baked goods or offered to help with repairs. Others simply stood in silence, reading the names on the stones and wondering about the stories behind them. The local history teacher, Mr. Ramirez, visited and asked Mrs. Ellison if he could bring his class. She agreed, and soon, the garden became an outdoor classroom. Students learned about the wars, about the power of words, and about the importance of remembering those who served. Mrs. Ellison encouraged them to write their own letters to veterans, to family members, to anyone who might need a kind word. The kids who once saw Mrs. Ellison as a figure of fear now saw her as a friend and mentor. They helped her plant new flowers, repaint the old fence, and even organize a Memorial Day ceremony in the garden. For the first time in years, Mrs. Ellison's house was filled with laughter, voices, and the warmth of community. As spring arrived, the garden flourished. New plaques appeared, each one telling a story of a letter sent, a friendship formed, a life remembered. Mrs. Ellison's health began to fade, but the kids and their families rallied around her, making sure the garden was always cared for, and that she was never alone. On her last Memorial Day, the entire neighborhood gathered in the backyard. The kids read aloud from the letters. Parents shared stories of their own relatives who had served, and Mrs. Ellison, frail but smiling, thanked everyone for keeping the memories alive. "This garden isn't just for me," she said. "It's for all of us, for anyone who's ever felt alone, or forgotten, or in need of a friend. As long as you remember, none of them are truly gone." After Mrs. Ellison passed away, the town decided to preserve her garden as a memorial. The kids, now older, became its caretakers. They told new generations about the woman who wrote letters in a time of war, and about how a storm revealed not just a garden, but the heart of their community. As the years passed, Mrs. Ellison's garden became a cherished landmark in the neighborhood. The once overgrown yard was now a place of peace and reflection, where families came to remember and honor the soldiers who had touched her life through letters. The kids who had once trespassed now took pride in their role as caretakers, learning the value of history, empathy, and community. The garden inspired a new tradition in the town. Every year on Veterans Day, the neighborhood gathered for a ceremony in Mrs. Ellison's backyard. The children read letters aloud, some written decades ago, others newly penned by local students to veterans. The event brought together people of all ages, bridging generations through stories of courage and kindness. One spring, the local library hosted an exhibit dedicated to Mrs. Ellison's wartime correspondence. The display featured original letters, photographs, and artifacts. From the garden, visitors from nearby towns came to learn about the power of pen pals during war and the enduring impact of one woman's compassion. The kids who had once feared Mrs. Ellison now spoke of her with reverence. Max, who had first picked up the letter in the garden, went on to become a history teacher, inspired by the stories he had heard. He often brought his students to the garden, encouraging them to write letters of their own, continuing the legacy of connection and remembrance. Though Mrs. Ellison eventually passed away, her spirit lived on in the garden and the hearts of those she touched. The community vowed to maintain the memorial, ensuring that the stories of the soldiers and the kindness of a wartime pen pal would never be forgotten. The garden became a symbol of hope and healing, a reminder that even in the darkest times, human connection can light the way. It taught the children and adults alike that every letter, every act of kindness, and every memory shared has the power to change lives. In a world that often rushes by, the garden stood as a quiet testament to the enduring strength of compassion and the importance of remembering those who came before. And so, the story of Mrs. Ellison and her secret garden continued to bloom, inspiring generations to come. The passing of the years only deepened the garden's meaning for Willow Lane and beyond. Each season brought new blooms and new faces. The children who once tiptoed through Mrs. Ellison's yard grew up, but the lessons they learned there lingered. Many left for college or new jobs, but whenever they returned home, they made a point to visit the garden, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends or their own children, sharing the stories they'd heard under Mrs. Ellison's gentle guidance. The Veterans Day ceremony became a town-wide event. Local scouts helped plant new flowers. Each spring, musicians played softly during the memorial readings, and veterans from neighboring communities joined in, drawn by the story of the pen pal whose kindness had reached across continents and decades. The garden's bench was often occupied by visitors deep in thought, some leaving small tokens, a dog tag, a folded flag, a handwritten note. One year, a group of high school students launched a digital project, scanning Mrs. Ellison's letters and creating an online archive. They interviewed local veterans and families, collecting oral histories and pairing them with the letters. The project gained attention from regional media, and soon, people from across the state were sending in their own stories of wartime, correspondence, and unexpected friendship. The garden inspired art and poetry. The town's annual festival featured a contest for the best letter written to someone who made a difference in the writer's life. Winning entries were read aloud in the garden, their words drifting among the roses and memorial stones. Local artists painted murals along the fence, depicting scenes from Mrs. Ellison's life and the journeys of the soldiers she'd befriended. As the garden's fame grew, so did the sense of unity it fostered. The town council designated it a historical site, ensuring its preservation for future generations. Volunteers organized regular cleanup days, and local businesses donated supplies for upkeep. The garden became a place where people gathered not just to remember, but to heal, to find comfort in shared stories and the quiet strength of community. Teachers brought their classes to the garden for lessons on history, empathy, and the power of words. Students wrote their own letters, some to veterans, others to family members, and some to strangers, each note a thread in the tapestry of connection Mrs. Ellison had begun weaving so many years before. On the anniversary of Mrs. Ellison's passing, the town held a candlelight vigil in the garden. Neighbors, veterans, and children stood side by side, sharing memories and reading excerpts from letters that had traveled across oceans and generations. The mayor spoke about the garden's legacy, calling it the soul of Willow Lane, a place where kindness is remembered and hope is always in bloom. The garden's influence reached beyond the town. Schools from other communities visited, inspired to start their own memorial projects. Veterans organizations held workshops on letter writing and storytelling, using Mrs. Ellison's example as a beacon of compassion. The online archive grew, connecting people who had never met but who shared a bond through words and remembrance. Max, now a respected teacher, often reflected on how a single storm had changed everything. He would tell his students, history isn't just in books, it's in the gardens we tend, the letters we write, and the kindness we show. Mrs. Ellison taught us that every act of remembrance is an act of love. Each spring, as the first buds appeared in the garden, the town was reminded that legacies are not built in grand gestures, but in the quiet, steady acts of care that echo through time. Mrs. Ellison's garden stood as living proof that even the smallest kindness can grow into something beautiful, enduring, and transformative. And so, the story continued, one letter, one flower, one visitor at a time, a testament to the power of memory, the strength of community, and the enduring hope that blossoms when we choose to remember.